love questions like that. You know why I love questions like that? Because to make such a question, to ask such a question, you have to invoke, you have to present something, and it's called good. So whenever people ask me that, whenever I've been challenged about the expressions of the wrath of God in Scripture and how God can wipe out an entire people, how God can send a flood, how God allows the sicknesses, the illnesses, the diseases, the atrocities of war, the murders, the rapes, pillagings, and all of the transgressions of humanity. How can a good God allow that, Lewis? And then how can he judge us? How can a good God do it? My response to those questions is this: how do you define good? What qualifies to good? Because listen to this: if I didn't create you and you didn't create me and we did not create ourselves, then whatever the good is, it's something that is higher than us. It's something that's beyond us. Listen to this part right here. The good was something that existed before humanity came into existence. So if you posit, if you establish, and the scripture does posit, the scripture does establish the existence of God before all created things. I mean, once again, we quote it all the time. In the beginning, God created. God is the subject of everything created. There were no heavens. There were no Hashemayim in the Hebrew. There was no earth. There was no Haaretz in the Hebrew. But God brought all these things into existence. So God himself, in any definition of good, existed before humanity existed. Listen to this part right here. Any definition of love existed before humanity existed. So it really doesn't matter what I think is love. This love doesn't derive from Lewis. It really doesn't matter what you think is love. It really doesn't matter what I think is grace. It really doesn't matter what you think is grace, because grace existed before we existed, because God existed before we existed. His name Yahweh means the one whose reason for existence lies within himself. He is existence. And so the one whose reason for existence lies within himself, he brought me into existence. But he existed with the attributes of love. He existed with the attributes of grace. He existed with the attributes of mercy. He existed with the attributes of wrath, of righteous indignation, of justice. He existed with those things in the highest degree, because as he himself is eternal, so are all of his attributes. So are all of his characteristics. So what are you saying, Pastor? What I'm saying to you is this: when someone says, how can a good God do this or that? I follow up the question, how do you define good? Because when you ask the question, when that question is asked, what is meant by that is, how can a good God, in terms of how I view good, in terms of how I qualify good, do this or that? Because then they begin to bring God into judgment. But the basis from which they bring God into judgment, the basis from which they look at the scriptures and they see the acts of God and they find them unfair, they find them inequitable, it's based upon their own conception of what is good.